With some big AAA games, it just feels like you can't hide from hearing about them. You can't escape the hype. Lots of big games just get lots of big hype. Every so often, probably more frequently in recent years, hyped up games release, and then it turns out it was really overhyped. The game just didn't deliver.
Sorry, my mistake.
But having said that, in the last few years, there have also been a lot of games that had a lot of hype behind them and ended up actually delivering. So today, instead of doing a negative video, we take a break and we talk about some good recent games that actually delivered on the hype. We got 20 games to talk about, so let's get started off with number 20. Half-Life Alyx, man. When this game was announced in November of 2019, it had been only 12 years since the last Half-Life game, but man, did it feel like longer. This game shocked everyone, not just because it was a new Half-Life game after a long drought, but because it was a VR game. There was a lot of hype and just as much trepidation around this thing. But in the end, Alyx delivered in a big way. Not just a proper return to form for the Half-Life series, but as a true showcase for VR, actually. Like, in many ways, this is still one of the premier VR games. They built everything around showcasing and highlighting the unique features of VR, not like a gimmick, and it did spectacularly. This is one of those games that was more overhyped post-release than after. Everybody who had a headset was going crazy for it, myself included. But it also is one of those games that I think managed to win over the VR haters too. What Half-Life 2 did for physics models and stuff like that, Half-Life Alyx did for VR innovation. It really is a standout game that even now feels like something from the future. This is a game that's deserved all the accolades it's gotten so far and then some. They really succeeded here where so many other VR games have failed, and a lot of people I think don't realize that we kind of got Half-Life 3. And it's Half-Life Alyx. There's some really interesting story stuff in there.
Impressive work, Ms. Vance.
Gordon Freeman?
Gordon Freeman. Ms. Vance, you wouldn't need all that to imprison Gordon Freeman.
So, who are you?
Perhaps what I am is not as important as what I can offer you in exchange for coming all this way.
Now at number 19, the Silent Hill 2 remake. The original 2001 game, that's like a classic of the survival horror genre, and the die-hard Silent Hill fan base was always going to be extremely skeptical about any possible remakes. Konami had already screwed up the game once with the Silent Hill HD collection release, you remember that? By the time this new attempt at a remake was announced, Konami had given up, walked away from making games. And up to this point, their attempts at reviving the Silent Hill brand were not really filling people with a lot of confidence. Even newer stuff in this batch like Silent Hill The Short Message and Silent Hill Ascension didn't exactly bode well for the future of the franchise. Konami's choice of developer had some people questioning it too. Bloober Team had cut their teeth on horror games, but they had never made anything close to the necessary size and scale and quality of a proper Silent Hill game. Still, on name recognition alone, there was still a lot of hype for the Silent Hill 2 remake. Even if fans and insiders were speculating the project might not turn out so good, but people's love for Silent Hill 2 more than anything was just so undeniably strong. And when the game finally did come out and exceed the expectations of even the most jaded fans, it was a real eye-opening moment. In hindsight, it's clear that this was like a make or break it moment for Bloober, the developers. You know, this was a remake they could not screw up for the future of their company. But we've seen many developers saddled with an almost impossible burden like this and crash and burn in the past. So I can't blame anyone for assuming the worst, even if it does make sense why they managed to pull this one off. In a lot of ways, they had to. And we're glad they did, because it's good as hell. Next at number 18, Split Fiction. After the frankly absurd success of It Takes Two, to date, the game has sold like around 27 million copies. The next game from the developers, Hazelight, it had a lot to live up to. Expectations were through the roof for this to be good, but they still managed to top themselves with their new co-op adventure. The game once again has a kind of middling and sometimes awkward plot, but the gameplay is where this thing shines. And in some key ways, they actually managed to up their game with the almost perfectly crafted It Takes Two. They managed to step it up again. The general flow of gameplay is mostly like just a refinement rather than a complete reinvention, but they just keep coming up with new and creative game mechanics that just constantly refresh themselves before anything starts to drag on for too long. It's so crazy that like a co-op game like this, that is this long, manages to also stay exciting the whole entire time, but that's just a testament to their game design here. They're really wizards. Nobody does co-op quite like these guys. Like they just really get it, and it is worth the hype.
Always trust your dentist. This will get on your nerves.
Hey, let me out!
Now at number 17, Batman Arkham Shadow. The developer, Camouflage, they had their work cut out for them. The expectation was nothing less than creating the Half-Life Alyx of Batman games. So basically, they needed to make a game that stood toe-to-toe with what is considered by many the best VR game ever made, and also the Batman Arkham series, which are some of the best modern Batman things ever. So no pressure, guys. It was an idea that should not have worked. I mean, even Rocksteady didn't knock it out of the park when they made a Batman VR game. Within VR circles, there was a lot of excitement and some impossibly high expectations for Arkham Shadow, given the developer's pedigree and also that it takes place in the Arkhamverse. And in the end, the game pulled off exactly what it was going for. It really did succeed in actually making you feel like Batman. It was a fun new Batman adventure with a great story that slotted in after Batman Arkham Origins. And I think it raised the bar again for VR games, specifically VR action games for sure. Next at number 16, Resident Evil Village. You know, it was hard not to be hyped up about this one, but as usual with Capcom's recent output for the series, it was excellent. It cannot be understated just how excited everyone was for this game. It was nuts. There was a lot of excitement behind it and a whole lot of expectations too. What's wild is how little we actually knew going in. There was promise of werewolves and big lady vampires, maybe Chris Redfield, but the rest of the game was a total mystery. So when we all actually got the chance to play the thing and found out it was like a spiritual successor to Resident Evil 4 kind of in first person, I can't speak for everyone, but it was a pretty cool thing to find out, and it had some incredibly memorable moments throughout. This is really the game that I think solidified and like made it crystal clear that no matter what weird direction Capcom wanted to take the series, we can come in mostly blind and still expect them to deliver something really cool and interesting to play. Sure, they had more than proven themselves capable of making a great Resident Evil game after Resident Evil 7, but this game was the real tipping point, whether they could keep putting out excellent new weird, creative games in the series, or whether the series was always just going to be stuck in the past. Village manages to walk the line between the two, and it may not be a perfect Resident Evil game. It certainly has its flaws. I think it has more flaws than 7. It still was awesome, and it was worth the hype. Now at number 15, Arc Raiders. Man, there are so many flash in the pan multiplayer games that come out, and many of them get hyped to the moon, but after a few weeks, they kind of wither away and die. It's enough to make a guy really cynical about any new online shooters. Especially in 2025, when even good games like Battlefield 6 can still find ways to disappoint you, like with that game's weird Firestorm mode. Look, Arc Raiders was a game with a lot of hype behind it after release, but the difference was that it wasn't all just manufactured hype. The game was legit, and because of that, instead of quickly losing players like most of these games tend to do post-release, it actually grew after the game's initial launch. Now, what could have been yet another failed extraction shooter actually managed to find an audience who stuck around, mostly because the game was just that good at its core. It's just a fun game that encourages really interesting player cooperation in some clever ways, like making sure aggressive players get queued together with more friendly types. The game actually adjusts your queue depending on your playstyle. It's like a slightly kinder and gentler sort of extraction shooter, which makes it far more casual friendly compared to the other nearly impenetrably difficult games in the genre. It's also not free to play, and I think that helps the game a lot too. Look, still to this day, like, it's a game that has a whole lot of hype. It got a whole lot of hype, but in this case, it actually like just earned it the old-fashioned way.
Did you need the core sentinel?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
No.
Next at number 14, Elden Ring and the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I mean, Elden Ring, it's an open world Dark Souls. Of course, the hype behind this one was impossibly high. It's got hype from the hardcore Soulsborne audience and the generally more casual open world game enjoyers. Released at the perfect time when excitement around Souls games was like at an all-time high. There was always the chance that they'd screw it up. I mean, this was their first fully open world game after all, but we all know how it actually turned out. The game is a glorious expansion of that studio's usual formula, and it just works incredibly well. Some old school fans might have some issues with some of the changes they made to the usual style of these games to work in an open world structure, but overall, the game was like a masterclass in gameplay, game design, and showed that the mystery and the joy of exploration in their usual games could be used for a game that's much bigger in every way, but still manages to feel interconnected and intricate. And it had a cool story to boot, with what you could figure out on your own. And of course, it was a difficult game, and it only got even harder with the game's big old DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. That's where the hype was, man. Fans like already had extremely high expectations for From Software DLC, but nobody could have guessed just how huge this new add-on was really going to be. It is massive. Practically a mini sequel rather than like a little slice of DLC content. And while the map may feel a little empty at times, everything else is so good, the bosses, everything, it barely matters. Elden Ring and its DLC is just awesome. That's not like a hot take. I'm pretty sure you probably know that. Now at number 13, Metroid Dread. You'd think a game that's been in development off and on for like 20 years would be a total mess when it finally came out. Seriously, Nintendo was working on Metroid Dread in like some shape or form for like 2 decades. The game could have been their very own Duke Nukem Forever, but somehow the final product was actually great. Not just because it was like a return to the classic side-scrolling gameplay, but also because it's just a well-made and fun Metroid game that also looks great and actually expands the lore of the Metroid series in an interesting way that fans, I think, generally appreciated. And there was a ton of hype behind this one. There was like a real weight of expectation going in here with the game's primary developer developer, Mercury Steam, they really proved themselves capable of making a decent Metroid game with the Return of Samus remake. I absolutely loved that. I still think it's underrated. But there was no telling how this one would turn out, so when it did come out and managed to exceed most people's expectations and be just a banger Switch game, it really did feel like they pulled off a miracle. It's still not considered a perfect Metroid game. Some people just do not like the stealth sections, but on the whole, this game is excellent and a really, really solid Metroid game. Next at number 12, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. Yeah, this one, like outside of Telltale's take on the franchise, The Walking Dead really has not had the best luck with video games. Because of the license, there's always a lot of excitement and expectations around these games, but if you follow the game industry, then you're probably expecting any game with The Walking Dead name tacked onto it just sucks. We're all always hoping for like The Walking Dead Season 1 or something like that, but instead what we mostly get is that like games like Survival Instinct. Saints and Sinners is one of the good ones though. The production values are far above what we've come to expect for these types of games, and the actual gameplay is tense and engaging. They really use the VR format here well, and in doing so, they made one of the few actually great VR exclusive games and a rare good Walking Dead game. Look, it's not quite as mind-blowing as something like Half-Life Alyx, but the fact that it's even in the same ballpark is awesome. The game is a ton of fun. Next at number 11, Donkey Kong Bananza. There's always going to be a lot of big hype for a big new Nintendo release, but pretty much right up until release, everybody was kind of scratching their heads about what exactly Donkey Kong Bananza was really gonna be. Of course, the level of excitement for this thing was huge because it was a new 3D Donkey Kong game, but even with the legendary entertainment planning and development group working on the game, which are the same guys who actually worked on Mario Odyssey, still, nobody knew quite what to expect here. Good things were expected, but I don't think anyone could have just guessed like how unconventional and creative and boundary pushing this game would end up being. At its heart, it's a traditional platformer, but everything else about this game is so unique, it challenges a lot of the usual expectations for a game like this, with its freeform destruction and digging mechanics. It just gives players a lot more freedom than these sorts of games usually do. In many ways, the game is them taking their ideas from Odyssey and pushing them even further to really impressive results. Now at number 10, Black Myth Wukong. Like any massively anticipated game, there's going to be a lot of excitement alongside a lot of skepticism. The studio behind Black Myth, Game Science, they had never really made a game even close to the scale of this one. Trailers promised a massive game with like a frankly absurd amount of bosses, with over-the-top graphics. Excitement was high, but there were plenty of voices saying that there was no way these guys could possibly execute on the promises here. There's no way that a small team could pull this off, right? There's no way a game could actually look this good, right? Still, that is hype in a way. If a game feels like it looks too good to be true, but then it actually came out and was actually what they had advertised. Black Myth Wukong actually delivered on all its promises with a game that played well, looked incredible, and was way longer than most people assumed. With so many games coming out of China, like by relatively unknown studios, that end up being kind of middling, Wukong managed to beat the odds and surprise us all. It's a great game that thankfully doesn't lean quite so heavily on the Souls formula like a lot of people initially thought. It's more of a straight up action game with a lot of interesting mechanics. It's one of the few really different feeling action games from the past few years. All that really matters is that the game is good. The amount of boss fights might actually be a little too dense to some, but like, it's a pretty minor complaint when everything about Wukong is far better than it has any right to be. And now they just got us looking forward to their next game. So mission accomplished. Next at number 9, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. After the massive and somewhat unexpected success of the first game, because it managed to sell like over 10 million units by 2025, the hype for the sequel was huge. People love the first game, despite its flaws. The original game may have looked amazing for a Kickstarter project and was doing something legitimately different with its more grounded take on an open world RPG, but it was, and still is, kind of buggy, weird, hard to get into. So while we were all excited for the next one, there was some concern that it could launch in an even worse state than the first. That did not happen, and instead, we got one of the best, most self-assured sequels of all time that improves on the original game in just about every way. It seems like the majority of people that loved the first one and hyped up a release for a second game ended up coming away very happy, very satisfied. There's nothing else out there that plays quite like Kingdom Come, with its mix of survival game mechanics, sometimes brutal difficulty, and story-based RPG stuff. But somehow, it all comes together and it works. It's a game that kicks your ass in the start and makes you slowly crawl your way back to being able to take on even a single guy. But the progression from zero to hero, something we see in a lot of games, is just so unique here. It is very satisfying. It's still a challenging game that asks a lot from the player, but compared to the first game, better story, bigger adventure, more fun, more to do. It's just a win-win. Now at number 8, Alan Wake 2. Now, whoever decided that the follow-up to their smash hit game Control would be a follow-up to Alan Wake of all things is a madman. Remedy fans have been waiting for a proper Alan Wake sequel for years and years, and most assumed that it was never going to happen. And after the success of Control, many believed that was really going to be it for Alan Wake. So when Control released a DLC that was entirely a setup for a potential Alan Wake sequel, it was really exciting. When they actually revealed Alan Wake 2 proper, it felt like an impossible dream had finally come true. Expectations were impossibly high for this game, from both old school Alan Wake fans and Control fans following Remedy into their next project. Everybody wanted this thing to be good. And thankfully, they managed to pull it off. Alan Wake 2 is like Remedy unleashed. They've been given carte blanche to do whatever they want, and they really go for it with this game, which manages to be scary and simultaneously the most ridiculous game yet. It's like everything pushed to the extreme, everything experimental, everything fun, and all of it somehow works. And in terms of hype, it was absolutely worth the wait. Years and years wanting a sequel, seeing that there was apparently a canceled idea for a sequel years back and still hoping it would see the light of day. It was worth the wait. And going for a more traditional survival horror experience was really the right call here, and splitting the narrative into two was the right call so that we could get pure, uncut Alan Wake nonsense when you're playing as a titular character, while also getting more of a grounded, character-based detective story that expands on the town of Bright Falls with Saga. Look, it's a whole lot to juggle, but the game miraculously makes it all work. Now at number 7, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. By the time Cyberpunk DLC got properly announced here at the Game Awards 2022, people were ready and willing to change their opinion about the game. I mean, steady updates from CD Projekt Red had improved the game's reputation after its original busted, disastrous launch, But the DLC was really where the game needed to shine to fully redeem the game in the eyes of the public. After great expansions, stuff like Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine from Witcher 3, expectations were extremely high and all eyes were on this thing because while there was a lot of positivity about the DLC going in, there was still a little blood in the water over the handling of the main game. If Phantom Liberty were anything short of excellent, then people were more than ready to turn on Cyberpunk again. And the way the hype built for this thing just made the stakes even higher. People were excited, but it had big shoes to fill. And again, if CD Projekt Red can do anything, they can definitely do DLC, because Phantom Liberty is a really damn good one. Like Shadow of the Erdtree that we talked about before, it practically feels like a sequel to its own game, with like a story with plenty of twists and turns and intrigue, but also just a lot of really good fun gameplay and side missions. It's a roller coaster ride full of cool set pieces, memorable story moments. For some people, it's even better than the base game, and well worth the hype. They actually managed to pull it off, and all it took was a huge DLC and a big old patch that completely overhauled the game. Now at number 6, Hollow Knight Silksong. For an indie game, the hype around the long-awaited follow-up to the OG Hollow Knight was just insane, man. Like, other than GTA 6, there's nothing else in recent memory that was this hyped, this anticipated, and this talked about. A big part of it was like the memes and general fervor around the game's impending release date. For years, fans just kind of waited in bating breath for like any shred of information from Team Cherry. And for years and years, all they got was radio silence. The lack of updates combined with the crazy hype for this game led the fan base down to some strange places. People were legitimately losing their minds over this game not showing up at Nintendo Direct announcements or PlayStation State of Plays. It was a constant topic wherever video game trailers were getting shown, and the hype only snowballed from there. It helped build it even more. Expectations for the game were at like impossible levels when it finally released on September 4th of 2025, and at least at first, it seems like people weren't sure what to make of it. Most acknowledged that the game was good, but it seems like it took a few months for the game's quality to really settle in with people. And now it is generally accepted that the game was incredible. It just took a second to get there. Like, the impossible weight of expectations were so heavy on the game that it was hard to even evaluate it properly. The game was actually far more different than anyone expected, too. More nimble and a hell of a lot more challenging than the original game. It wasn't what we all expected, but the end result is actually better than we could have even hoped for. Now at number 5, Baldur's Gate 3. Here's another game with the almost unbearable weight of expectations attached to it. It's Larian, the people behind the well-liked Divinity Original Sin 2, working on a new Baldur's Gate game. Even if you haven't played the original BioWare CRPGs, you know that they're big games. They were a big deal, and they have a lot of expectations attached to them. They could have played it safe here and budgeted the game modestly. That's how most PC-centric CRPGs really do it. These types of games are usually thought of as pretty niche compared to the more popular modern games with limited appeal. Larian could have accepted that generally agreed upon idea that CRPGs just don't have to be that big and huge, but they didn't. Instead, they ramped up and bet big on the game being a success, and that bet paid off in dividends. The cutting-edge graphics are what really got people in the door, but the fantastic freeform gameplay is what keeps people playing. That and great characters. It's a game that people only got more hype for after it came out, simply just because of how good it is. Next at number 4, Ghost of Tsushima. The game looked great from the first trailer that came out, and if you're a fan of Sucker Punch's other games, you might think it was weird that they were going for a historical Japan setting. Definitely a big shift from their Infamous games, but if you knew their Infamous games, if you played those games, then you were probably pretty excited for this because it looked ambitious. The trailers were cool as hell. The game was great. It had a great open world that wasn't bloated or too tedious to explore, and a combat system that was just really, really cool. Way better than we were used to at the time. The game's commitment to being immersive is one of its best elements too. You know, the blowing wind that guides you instead of a map marker to your next objective. The game's general lack of too much HUD or, on-screen information just really let you soak in the beautiful atmosphere of Japan. It's a heightened version of the island that doesn't quite match reality, both in geographic details and the real world history that they're drawing from to tell the game. It's not super accurate, but it doesn't really matter either way when the game is just this good. Now at number 3, the Demon Souls remake. Yes, Bluepoint has made some very good remasters in their time, but they had never really done something quite as ambitious as remaking the original From Software's Demon Souls. This is a game that Souls fans are always talking big on. They always want to tell you that their favorite Souls is the original Demon Souls. Still porting over and rebuilding a game from PlayStation 3 from the ground up for a next generation console was really ambitious and kind of scary. There was a lot of potential, but Bluepoint has made some great games. There was a lot of hype around this one. It was a PlayStation 5 launch title after all. And while you can quibble with the choices Bluepoint made when adapting the game here and there, you've got to admit that the game looks incredible. It's still, even a few years after its initial release, one of the best looking games. It's astonishing just how good this game looks at times while having a consistent frame rate. Many of the gameplay improvements are also very welcome. They're small, but remove some of the stiffness that was in the original game. And other than a few enhancements here and there and the graphical overhaul, the game is otherwise accurate and faithful to the Demon Souls experience, which remains pretty unique to this day. A whole new generation of people got to discover what the hype really was with Demon Souls, and I think the hype was completely warranted here. Now coming down at number 2, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It is extremely rare, especially these days, that a much hyped game mechanic actually lives up to expectations, but in Tears of the Kingdom, the Ultra Hand building thing absolutely lives up to all the lofty promises Nintendo made before release. This thing still feels like video game magic. There's nothing else really quite like it. The way you can combine various objects together to create machines for fighting enemies, traversing the environment, or just breaking and messing with the game, it's just so amazing. Especially coming from Nintendo, who normally wouldn't come up with such a weird, quirky, janky feature like this. I know they love their gimmicks and their experimentation, but nothing has ever quite felt like the Ultra Hand here. The power of it and all the new abilities you get completely change how you look at just about everything in the game. While the map may be the same geographically, technically, they added in a lot of new fun stuff in this game, above and below, that just set it apart from Breath of the Wild before it. It is a crazy, experimental game that feels like it's from the future. It's doing things that no other game has really been able to crack. Everybody else copied the gravity gun because it could be done, but nobody is copying the Ultra Hand. It's crazy that they were able to get this thing to work as well as it does, and it's really cool. It was a worth the hype feature. Now at number 1, we haven't talked about this game enough, Persona 5 Royale. This updated re-release from 2022 took an already great game and made it even better. I mean, Persona 5 is the breakout RPG for the series. It's got a great soundtrack, a ton of style, and the game's RPG turn-based combat is super fast and satisfyingly designed that really pushed Persona 5 to the mainstream and give Persona the biggest audience yet. Atlus loves to put out these updated re-releases of their games, and while many of them aren't really worth the time investment, Royale definitely is. It doesn't just change a few things up and, offer a remixed experience of the OG game. It adds an entire new final chapter that many consider to be superior to the original's game ending. Asking anyone to replay this game again after having completed the original 100-hour behemoth is a big ask, but in this case, it's actually worth it because the game doesn't just save its changes for the beginning and end. It's made a ton of smart changes all over the place that are small individually, but all come together to make a better, more satisfying package overall. The expectations for this re-release, because the OG game was so good, the expectations were extremely high, but Atlus still managed to exceed them. And now this is the true definitive version of Persona 5. Anyway, those are 20 really hyped up games that actually delivered. We just wanted to talk about some cool stuff today. So let us know in the comments what games you think were hyped up, maybe you heard too much about, but then they came out and it was actually worth the conversation. Let's talk anything games, hyped games, down in the comments. Hit us up. If you like this video and you like talking games with us every single day, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell, because we put out new videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.